Welcome back to the Baunfire Gaming Podcast for episode 332. I am your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about more Titanfall 3 rumors, my blueprints, hot takes, South of Midnight final thoughts, and much more. Like a bunch more. A lot of small things this week. Getting into my opening thoughts. This is an exciting time. I think I talk about this every year. This kind of late April is kind of fun because this is when we start finding out a bunch of things. We start finding out when the summer showcases are going to be. We'll be talking a bit about that. We start to hear about games that are coming in the second half of the year. Right now, we really only know what's coming in the next couple months, with a few exceptions. And then, the games that always come out at the end of the year, like Call of Duty and things like that. And we also kind of, I feel like there's this kind of interesting kind of background noise with all three of the current, big console platforms, having their mind on hardware in different ways, obviously, but you can tell it's kind of there. Obviously, we have the Nintendo Switch 2 coming out here in just a couple months. We'll talk about that with the USA. It's very interesting. We have Xbox. There's been all these rumors that they could put out new hardware as soon as 2026. That we almost certainly are going to get an announcement about this collaboration they have with Asus for a handheld, like extremely soon. Like I would assume in the next month or so, if not at their showcase. And then Xbox's own handheld. Those rumors have been around for a while. Then we also have PlayStation. They've been a bit quieter, but they've talked about the PlayStation 6. They've already come out and said that they're going to be using AMD hardware on the PlayStation 6. It's not the biggest news in the world, and if anything, it's fairly predictable that that's what they were going to do, but they talked about it. So this is a fun time, which is cool because, I think it's easy to say that the world and the things happening outside of the gaming world aren't as fun. But we'll talk a little bit about that, but we'll mostly stay in the fun stuff. Let's jump into the gaming news. Okay, so we have, like I said, a bunch of small stories. The first one I'm going to kick off with is more Titanfall 3 rumors. So there are the same Apex leaker that said this a week or two ago is now alleging that the game will be announced soon, that it's imminently going to be finished. It will incorporate Apex Legends, and it's using Unreal Engine 5 instead of their older engine. I want to say that Titanfall 1 and 2 in Apex, I want to say it's like a Source engine. Someone can correct me in the YouTube comments or in the Spotify comments if you want. But I believe they're using Source engine. All I know is that those games were in Apex are on a very highly modified version of a really old, pretty unexpected engine, which is kind of interesting. The most notable voice that's kind of come out and talked about these rumors is Jeff Grubb, who's categorically denied that this is coming. He and others have cited the projects that Respawn is currently working on. We know that they have the next Jedi game, the third Jedi game is, I assume, their main focus right now. They also have that turn-based Star Wars game that they're working on with an outside studio. They're continuing to work on Apex as well. And supposedly he says there's a game in like super duper early pre-production that isn't Titanfall 3. And so what it kind of comes down to is that they just don't have the bandwidth to make they don't have a secret 200 devs hiding somewhere who have been working on Titanfall 3 for the last 3 or 4 years. I have found Jeff Grubb to be pretty hit or miss, especially as he kind of went from, when he was at GamesBeat being a straight up journalist to moving over to Giant Bomb, where he's more of like an entertainment personality. But I'm sure, especially within EA, seems to still have a lot of connections and sources there. It's more than likely true if he's talking about this stuff, especially with that. Even though I think he's always just vague enough to be able to weasel out if he's wrong about things. I find this extremely hard to believe that there's a Titanfall 3 that's like right around the corner. The only way I could honestly see that happening is if it's a co-development situation and there's been some other studio that's been, fully dedicated to working on this, potentially with Respawn's help, the way that they're helping with that turn-based kind of strategy Star Wars game, the XCOM style game that's supposed to be coming sooner than later. I want Titanfall 3 more than anybody. I love Titanfall 1. I really, really enjoyed the first one. 2 got even better because the story was insane. And the multiplayer is still, to this day, if you go play it, it's still a blast if you can find enough players, which it's more active than you probably would think. It's just, the first 2 games kind of, if you've ever heard anyone talk about Horizon Zero Dawn and the newer Horizon game through PlayStation, those 2 games got released at like the worst possible time. They got released at the, extremely close to other much bigger games. And while those 2 games have done well, they've always been kind of lauded a little bit for not being like the super hits that people thought they would be. Titanfall was kind of in that similar vein. I believe they got released right around the same time as Battlefield games and Call of Duty games, and they just kind of got set up for failure in a way, even though they're friggin' excellent. I still think to this day that Titanfall 2's movement is second to none. I think the gunplay is amazing, the way the gadgets work, and what I've always liked about Titanfall that I liked less about Apex because they got away from it was Titanfall always had this really cool kind of futuristic aesthetic that still felt extremely grounded. Like nothing about Titanfall, maybe some parts of the second game, but for the most part, the tech and stuff in Titanfall always felt like it could be real. Like one day that could be a thing. And I really appreciate that from kind of sci-fi brands and games and movies and stuff. I don't like the straight up kind of fantasy stuff that we see sometimes get mixed into sci-fi. Apex Legends has delved a little more into that, even though the base aesthetic is still pretty reasonable. And yeah, I want Titanfall 3 as much as anybody. I would love for these rumors to be true. It's, I'm puffing that hopium real hard, hoping that maybe everyone's wrong and somehow they develop this big AAA game kind of in secret. I'm not counting on it, unfortunately. Moving over to Blueprints. This is a game that kind of came out of nowhere. The first I even heard of it was when Jason Schreier, the pretty notable games journalist, really the only games journalist I really give any credit to at this point, even though I don't really care for him as a human as much. He kind of hinted to this. People figured out what game he was talking about, and then when the embargo came up, he's talked about it pretty openly. And then it's become kind of the hit game to talk about. It currently has, or it did have, the highest Metacritic score. Its current OpenCritic score is 90. On multi-platform games, I talk about OpenCritic because it combines all the scores from all the platforms. Metacritic still splits them up, and so you can be very pick and choosy about what narrative you want to draw, in my opinion, when you use Metacritic. So I use OpenCritic. It's really interesting. I mean, if you've heard about Blueprints in big gaming media at this point, you've heard people like fall over themselves for this game and really, be unable to be even a little objective about it. Honestly, it's people calling it a masterpiece, one of the best games I've ever played, all this stuff. And so that's where it's at. And this game is pretty much a surefire, at least probably going to be a candidate for Game of the Year this year and all the major award shows and with all the major publications. I've played about 5 hours. I get it. I get, like, it's cool. It's super cool. It is. It truly is. The problem for me is, and I'm wondering if other people, normies like myself, are going to run into this issue, is that even just for 2 or 3 days, I heard people saying some of the most insane stuff about this game, like masterpiece, greatest game I've ever played, one of the best games ever made, blah, 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 blah. And I think that almost does like a disservice to a game like this, where it is like the most AA of AA games, for sure. It looks okay. It has some nice tech in it. I'm assuming it's using Unreal Engine 5 or 4, but it has some like nice like I don't know if it's ray tracing. It could just be SSO, but at least it looks good. The reflections and stuff look great. I found some areas where it doesn't run the best, but it's fine. It runs fine. This is a kind of like a Metroidvania puzzle game is the best way I would describe it. That on its surface seems to be fairly simple. You are going into this mansion, and every door you go into, you get to pick what the next room is from these random blueprints that pop up. And you have to. The idea is you're trying to find this end room. That's that's the base take. No spoilers. I won't spoil anything here. Um, and you use this system of picking blueprints for the next room to do it, and you can get stuck. Basically, you can run out of places to go because of locked doors. There's also a step system, so every time you walk into a room, it takes a step away from you. You start with 50 steps. You can get more steps from eating food and by other methods. You can also unlock permanently more steps by doing other stuff in the world. Um, and so when you run out of steps or you get stuck and you are no longer able to make more rooms or whatever, open more doors, you rest and you go to a camp. You fall asleep, you wake back up at the front door, and you try again. And that's the Metroidvania part of it. You're and as you get to playing it, you find out, and I don't think this is spoilery, but basically it's not just about finding this final room that you're looking for. You have to complete a series of tasks around this whole property in order to get to the end of the game. That's all I'll say. So I'm only like 5 hours in. I I'm not a puzzle game guy. I am a Metroidvania guy. I love those kind of games. But I'm not a puzzle game guy. And I think the combination of that and after about 5 hours, like I get what this game is doing and I can see where it's going. And even from some non-spoilery guides I used to help me with a few things, I can just see where this is going. And then I see people talking online about having already played it, mostly reviewers, 50, 60 plus hours. And all I can think about is this game is cool. I love this idea. You couldn't pay me to play this game more than like 5 more hours, if that. Like, I get it. I played it with my daughter for a couple hours yesterday. I'm recording this on Friday. We had a blast. She was having fun, like trying to point things out to me, and I was having fun, going through all this. It was a good lesson for her of like, when we would end a run, she thought we lost, but we didn't lose. We just learned some, and now we're going to try to learn more, right? And so that was all cool. And there's a moment in one of the rooms where you can do a thing that sends you on this like Twin Peaks journey for a couple minutes. That so far is my favorite part of the game. That was like the coolest thing that's happened. But I'm just not finding that happening a lot. So reviews, opinions are all subjective, obviously. I completely believe that all these people who are saying this is a masterpiece, this is the best game I've ever played, whatever, feel that way. I have no doubt in my mind. I do think Schreier kind of tainted the well a little bit. I think a lot of people respect his opinion. I've never seen him talk about any game the way he did this before anyone else even played it or knew about it. So I think that there's a little bit of gaming journalists, game review industry kind of circle jerking going on with this game a little bit. I'm surprised that that as it spread, more people weren't like, oh yeah, it's cool, but like maybe not that cool. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong. I don't like Witcher 3. I don't care for a bunch of other games that people universally love. I'm probably the one who's wrong here. But it's been very interesting seeing the reaction to this game and then getting to play it myself. And again, I would say it's a solid like 8 out of 10 game. Cool game, for sure. If you have Game Pass, if you have the PS Plus, whatever that's called, check it out, play it. It's part of the service, play it. If you're on Steam, I think it's like $25 or something. If you like puzzle games, then I definitely suggest it. If you just are caught up in the hype and you want to check it out, it's $25. If you can afford that, go ahead and do it. By no means is this a bad game. It's really cool, from what I've seen that is coming, and I will probably keep playing it a little bit. I get it. That it's neat. I just am a little skeptical of how much of this like extreme hype cycle around it, and it's like it's a 10 out of 10. I saw someone say, if I could, I'd give it an 11 out of 10. I'm wondering how much of that is like real, genuine, original thought, and how much of it is being kind of influenced by their peers. It was really interesting. One of the reviewers kind of let out I think kind of like the worst industry secret, but if you don't know about it, you don't know about it. Because I've seen this myself. A lot of these games, either themselves will have a Discord for reviewers. So when you're playing a game early, obviously there's no guides and all that, and you can't just publicly, ask people for help and all that. So they'll set up like a Discord where you can talk to devs and other reviewers. There's also, and I've never seen this with my own eyes, but I've heard of it, that a lot of like really prominent game journalists are in Discords, talking about games that they're embargoed on. I find it really hard to believe that goes along with the embargo, just because I think the common thought, and I think the way it typically works, and I can't say I've never done this, is that if you have an NDA signed and your buddy who's also a game journalist or whatever has an NDA signed, you're not supposed to talk to each other. Like, you're not supposed to communicate with anyone. But there's this kind of like unspoken acknowledgement of like, hey, we're both NDA'd, we can talk about this. And I think that happens a lot. And I think that's how these Discord servers happen, where you have, I think, a lot of people. And I wonder, and sometimes it feels like positively or negatively, you see games and their scores get influenced by the fact that a bunch of these reviewers are definitely talking about these games, even though they're not supposed to, in these fairly big conversations in the background, hidden away from people's eyes. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. In this case, hey, cool for this developer. I assume this is a game made by like one person or at least a very small team. It's cool. I'm happy for their success. I'm glad so many people have found a game that they're super excited about and digging. I don't get it entirely. And I do think that maybe this is a case study in kind of groupthink and psychology and how humans work. And I think that's okay. But either way, that said, I still would give this game, from what I've played so far, a solid like 8 out of 10. I highly recommend you try it out if you're interested, or if you have the means to do it as part of a subscription. Xbox has announced their summer showcase. It will be on June 8th. It will be digital only, and afterwards there will be an Outer Worlds 2 showcase. This is exciting. The showcase after with Outer Worlds 2 is cool, because I think a lot of people assume that would just be Call of Duty again. We're supposed to get whatever the next Call of Duty is. I want to say in the Modern Warfare line that they're going to be doing another one of those, which is cool. I love those games. I'm glad they're not just showcasing that again. That game will sell on its own. They don't need help as much as I think last year they did the Call of Duty showcase, because it was their first Game Pass release of Call of Duty since the acquisition of ABK. So I think it made sense for them to be able to, kind of brag a little bit, be like, hey, look, we have it now. This is ours. And we're going to be the first ones to show it. That's really cool. This showcase is great. I don't expect Outer Worlds 2 to be a 20 million copy seller. I suspect it'll be a more niche game. After the success of Avowed, I'm really excited to see what they do with a genre and a game style and aesthetic that I'm a little more interested in. Avowed is really cool. I enjoyed it a ton. I'm ready to play. I'm ready to get back into my sci-fi space kind of setting. And if they learn the same lessons that they implemented in Avowed, that they do here in Outer Worlds 2, which I love the first game, but it definitely felt like a kind of first go at this type of game. If this is better Outer Worlds 2 or Outer Worlds 1, I'm down. It looks really great. The graphics looked really, really good. IGN posted 11 minutes of footage. It looks extremely good. I'm extremely impressed with how it looks. Even though their capture footage sucked, but I think that was a them problem. What I really noticed was the sound. The 11 minutes of gameplay they show Starts off in an outdoor area, comes to a smaller outdoor area, and then goes to like a corridor indoor area, and you could hear extremely distinct changes in the way that sounds worked. And it was really cool. Assuming I believe this is an Unreal Engine 5 game, they the newer engines have tech that is basically like ray tracing for visuals, but it's for audio. And I suspect that they're using something like that, or maybe they're using some old tech that they've had forever. And I'm just I don't know anything. But either way, the footage is really cool. Other games we're expecting to see updates on here. I mean, I assume everything. I assume we'll hear hopefully about like State of Decay 3, Fable. I think we'll almost certainly get some kind of acknowledgement of. Maybe Gears of War E-Day, Perfect Dark. I'm trying the Contraband game. I suspect we'll get something about that. Maybe Everwild. That'd be really cool. And then I have to imagine this is where they'll probably tease or announce a few newer games. Blade as well. We haven't heard about that in a while. But I assume we'll get some new announcements of other stuff. It's very quietly Xbox. I feel like it hasn't been talked much about. But they've been like swimming in 7s and 8s over the last year or so. They've released a bunch of really the last 2 or 3 years. They've released a ton of games, and it doesn't really get acknowledged the way I think it should, because they're not all like 10 out of 10s. But they're all like really good games. They're games I actually want to play. That I'm not worried about them being 10 out of 10 bangers necessarily. I'm really excited for their showcase. I think that they'll they have all these studios now. They're the biggest publisher in the world. And they, are the most profitable, or at least the biggest publisher in the world by revenue now as well, or at least they were in the last quarter, and I expect that to continue. So, especially with them putting their games on other platforms, I think they're doing a bunch of good stuff, and I think that that's only going to fuel even more good stuff. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Speaking of good stuff, let's talk about some not so good stuff. Doug Bowser, who's head of Nintendo USA, had said during an interview, and this was a bit taken out of context, so I'm not trying to be overly sensational about it. But long story short, when asked about the Switch 2 price and the reaction by consumers, he said that if they can't afford it, they can get a Switch 1. People very very quickly pointed out that this was a very similar attitude. Was it Don Matrick, I believe his name was, who was the head of before Phil Spencer at Xbox, and was the one who was kind of behind the Xbox One, which in many ways kind of permanently scarred Xbox with consumers. That when the Xbox One came out and that people were complaining about the price, he told them they could still get a 360. So I'm not as doom and gloom on Switch 2 as some people are. I think it will inevitably be not nearly as successful as the Switch 1. I've been pretty vocal about, especially as things have kind of shaken out. We still need to get more info about the actual hardware and stuff. But I truly believe that when there were rumors 2 or 3 years ago about a Switch Pro, just a mid-gen refresh, I think that was this. I still, I fully believe that was this. I think that they sat on this hardware for a couple years. They could have released this a while back. And if that's not true, I think that they, especially if the hardware is what they think it is fairly old hardware. They should have released this 2 years ago for $100 less as a mid-gen refresh and just kept the Switch train going. Hell, they could have counted it as a Switch 1 still and finally, been able to beat out that PS2 record. I just, this, and I talked about it last week, so I won't go on too much about it, but it's just, this Switch 2 feels so iterative. It just feels like a Switch 1 Pro from what we've seen so far. And instead of a truly like next gen experience, and even like Digital Foundry and stuff, digging more into it, went from saying like, oh yeah, it's like a PlayStation 4 Pro or Xbox One X kind of level system, maybe coming up to Xbox Series S in some capacity, to basically just being like, no, this is like a PS4 or an Xbox One. Like, and that's fine. Like, that's okay. It's a handheld. It's not like there's any Nintendo games that are pushing power that, you really need them, need the system to be a modern spec. But it's just, it's just weird. And it's taken me from someone who was going to buy a Switch 2 without any hesitation to I'm not going to buy one. I've been looking at emulator hardware lately, actually. Moving on. Assassin's Creed Shadows, final thoughts. So I've talked about this game, I think the last couple episodes. I did finally roll credits on it last weekend. It was awesome, so good. I rolled credits after about 55 hours. I would say, looking at my target board, I bet there's at least another 10, 20, maybe more hours left. That if you wanted to 100% that game and do everything, you could. I bet you could get at least 75 hours out of this game, if not more. And I say that in a positive way. That 55 hours, maybe a little bit of it, I felt like I was just grinding, but not really. I caught myself very often just running around the world, finding little encampments and stuff that I could, get materials from so I can upgrade my gear. And like the loop didn't feel tedious for me, at least. In the main story, I really enjoyed. I liked, the two main characters, especially as I started playing as both of them more. And I thought their stories were cool. I won't say it was like the most emotional thing or anything in the world. It wasn't. But there were a lot of moments that I really enjoyed in this game. And I highly recommend it. Assassin's Creed Shadows is really good. It's currently my game of the year. So I don't think I can really say more than what I've said about it already. I love the combat. I love the exploration. I love the general game loop. I find very few things to really complain about it. It's Assassin's Creed Shadows is, probably the Assassin's Creed game I've enjoyed the most since Origins. And I liked Odyssey. Like I said before, I barely consider Odyssey an Assassin's Creed game, more of a, Greek mythical game that I just happened to be Assassin's Creed. But this is right up there for me. I really enjoyed Shadows. So if you're on the fence, it's Ubisoft. Wait for a sale if you want. I don't blame you, but it's worth a play, at least for me. Talking about the U.S. tariffs, that's been an interesting situation. If you haven't been paying attention, good for you. They are going all over the place with what they're doing. They had all these tariffs in all these different countries. The most recent, as I record this today, which doesn't really mean anything because this stuff can change at the whims of our dear leader. Right now, there's a blanket 10% tariff on all countries except for China, which has as of this moment, 145% tariff, which essentially is a tariff stop. No one's buying goods at that much of a markup because no consumer is going to pay the markup that you're going to have to put on something like this to make any money on it. So we'll see. I assume this is going to play out and get worked out eventually. The interesting thing is with some things that are going on right now, specifically with Nintendo, Nintendo obviously, like everyone else, builds a lot of their stuff in China, so that's going to be impacted. But they opened up some factories years ago in Vietnam, and that there's a pretty good chance that at least a good chunk of the Switch 2 hardware could come from Vietnam instead of China, even though the United States, with their way they've done their tariffs, may classify those things as being from China if they were obviously just working around the system. That goes beyond my pay grade. I don't really know how it works. But we still don't have any actual word on what's going to happen with the Switch 2. They delayed pre-orders in the United States as well as some other places. And they even delayed the launch in China due to some regulatory issues, I guess. So that's a story that won't really impact me or probably a lot of people who listen to this, but it's still something that's kind of interesting. We'll have to wait and see what happens with pricing. I suspect that they may do like an opening pre-order of any units that they already had in the United States at their $450 price. But anything that had to get shipped in, even with that 10% tariff, I've seen a lot of people saying that they think Nintendo should just bite the bullet and take a smaller profit margin or even sell at a loss. If you remember back to, and I've referenced this a billion times, so don't roll your eyes too hard. But back during the Activision Blizzard King trial, the acquisition things that were happening in the United States with Xbox. Xbox accidentally leaked a bunch of that info that was supposed to stay confidential. And one of those things was a chart of the revenue and the profit margin for the three major platforms. And it showed that PlayStation, this was a 1 year, I want to say it was like 2022 to 23, if I remember correctly, even though it probably was fairly representative of this generation. PlayStation had the most revenue, had a ton of revenue, but had the smallest profit margin and took home the least amount of actual cash of the three major platforms. The reason that would be is that games like The Last of Us and these big blockbuster games cost a ton of money to make, like $250 million. They also have canceled multiple projects, so that means that they put millions and millions of dollars into games that just got canceled and never came out. Or you have like a game like Concord that released and then got canceled immediately and they shut down the studio. So you would assume that because PlayStation has the most revenue, that they make the most money, but they actually make the least for all those reasons. Xbox was in second place, where I believe I want to say Xbox and Nintendo had similar revenue numbers, but Xbox's profit margin is less than Nintendo's, but more than PlayStation, to the point where Xbox, even though it was like half the revenue, was actually taking home more money, had more money coming in the bank for profit than PlayStation did of actual dollars, because they have a higher profit margin. And then Nintendo is just insane. Like their profit margin, I want to say that PlayStation's was like less than 10%. I want to say Xbox's was around 10%. And then PlayStation's was like 30%. They are profit margin queens. And that is why I think with this, people saying like, oh, they should sell it at a loss or whatever, that they will not. They will not do that, because why would they? They're Nintendo. They know people are going to buy these things regardless. I speculate that the Switch 2 probably costs around $250 to $300 to make. So even the $450 price is them immediately going for a 33% margin, which is, good for them, because it'll work if people can buy them for $450. You start getting up to the $500-600 with tariffs and all that could be there. They'll probably have some more issues there, and maybe they will figure something out. But I just, I don't think people always realize, like, the reason Nintendo never discounts games, the reason that they are raising prices on things and stay pretty stubborn with what they charge for stuff is because they can, and that their profit margin makes them extremely successful and very safe. While you see even Xbox and PlayStation kind of scrambling to make money on the things they're doing, Nintendo doesn't have to do that. And the amount of profit they've made in the last 8 years off the Switch 1, is probably enough for them to run that company for the next 50 years. But why would they stop there? It's, they're a corporation. It's their job to make money, right? And so I don't believe they're gonna take one for the team and lighten up, but we'll have to wait and see. My other concern with these tariffs is that even the 10% tariffs, if that's what games go up. Say a game that was 70, they bump it up to 80. Say a console that was 400 gets bumped up to 5, or that was 500 gets bumped up to whatever. Even after those tariffs go away, and we saw this with COVID stuff, where prices jumped on COVID, on groceries and everything else during COVID. The prices either didn't drop after the reason for those jumps went away, shortages and so on, or something I noticed was the whole shrinkflation thing, where say a bag of chips, a 15-ounce bag of chips was $5 before COVID. Then it jumped up to $10 during COVID because of supposed shortages. Well, then after those shortages went away, maybe they dropped their price back down to $5, but now it's a 12-ounce bag of chips instead of 15. It's stuff like that. So, and that's harder to do in the gaming sphere. And so I just kind of expect that prices are just going to go up and stay there. I fully expect the Xbox Next and the PlayStation 6 to be at least $750, to be 50% more than the last gen, if not more. It depends on where things are going. And I could easily see, especially next gen, the games go up to $80 minimum, and that just be the base, and them cite whatever reasons they want to do that. So, and that may come sooner and later. We know that some of the games on Switch 2 are going to be 80. There's rumors that Rockstar is going to sell Grand Theft Auto, the base game, for 100. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Our fun little cheap hobby seems like it's kind of going a different direction, and that's a bummer. But it is what it is. South of Midnight, I finished it. It has an open critic score now of 78. It started off in the low 80s. I assume as more scores came in, it dropped a little bit. I think that score is pretty fair. I'd probably give it like a 7.5 out of 10. 7.5, I think, is what I gave it when I reviewed it on my social media. It's a great game, and I want to be very clear. Anything over like a 6 and up is a good game to me. I think if you're down like the 6 out of 10, you're talking about something pretty niche that someone needs to be a fan of that genre of game to be into it. As you get up into the 7s, I think you start to, maybe a little wider appeal. Maybe everyone should give it a go at least, especially on Game Pass. Then when you get up into the 8s, the 9s, those are games that like pretty much everyone should at least try out. And then you get up to the 10s, and that's a game everyone should play. I think a good 7.5 out of 10 for South of Midnight is perfect. As the reviews said, and I talked about, the combat is pretty forgettable. I utilized the option to skip combat as often as I could. It's not bad. Like, the combat is perfectly adequate. And if you like the type of combat it is, almost like the old like God of War style combat, obviously not as gory and stuff. But I'm sure there's people who love the combat and eat it up. I didn't care for it as much, but I really love the story. I really love the characters. I really love the art style and the environments and the graphics of this game just as a whole. The music as well. I freaking love the music. It is a really, really cool game. One of my favorite things through the game was through various story elements. The main character, Hazel, changes outfits a few times, and her hair also changes every time. And I don't know, they were just so on point with the way they designed her kind of aesthetic and look. And the costume changes happen in a way that makes sense, and it's just very cool. So there specifically is a moment fairly early in the game. This game has a very Hellblade kind of feel to me, Hellblade 1, where like the game itself is amazing and is worth a play. It's a great time. It's not too long. But there's elements of it that are, definitely, can be improved maybe in future installments. But that it's still worth a playthrough for most people. And even the way, without spoiling things, I really love games that don't have antagonists that are just bad guys. I really love games that allow antagonists to be real and have complicated feelings and emotions and motivations. And this game definitely does that. Like the main antagonist in the game has a really good reason to be doing the things they're doing that just isn't very fair to everyone else. And that's where I'll leave that. So, like a moment not even halfway through the game had me pretty emotional over a thing that happened. So just a really great game. South of Midnight is very much a game I really, 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 really hope they get a compulsion gets a chance to make another one of these on a grander scale. It'd be cool to see a bigger version of this, and we'll have to wait and see. I think there's a lot to explore here, but we'll have to see what they do. PlayStation is releasing a $100 bundle of The Last of Us 1 and 2's remakes, which is the Last of Us Complete, I believe, edition, which I jokingly say, and I promise I'm trying not to be too console worry about this, but I'm fairly certain there's been more unique releases of the Last of Us series than there are PlayStation 5 exclusives, at least first party ones. It's wild. This one, I've lamented on this before, where I very much think that PlayStation packages next gen patches, which like Xbox did for free on most of their games. I think everything but Outer Worlds 1 has a free upgrade patch, if they did an upgrade, where PlayStation's done this like $10 upgrade thing. And it's only $10. I understand. And they tend to add more than just graphical upgrades, but that's what it really is though. Especially I think the thing that annoys me the most about it is the way it happens is PlayStation releases a game, then 3 or 4 years later they do a PC version, and then a year or so later they do a next gen upgrade or a remake or remaster. And all that remake or remaster is just what they did for the PC version, just the settings turned up. And so it's not even like it's a bespoke remake or remaster they're even doing. They're just utilizing, which is smart. It's efficient. It's a good way to make money. Good for PlayStation. Not hating on that, but just, I don't know. Didn't you already make your money? But again, corporation, their job is to make money. They're very good at it, obviously. So this is obviously to coincide with the release of season 2 of The Last of Us TV show. It's got reviews and all that out there. It's not really my thing, so you can talk about that or find other places. It sounds like it's generally enjoyed, but maybe doesn't end the way people wanted it to. But I'll let you decide on that. But yeah, so more The Last of Us 2 releases. Never change PlayStation. The Call of Duty backlog is starting to show up in Game Pass, kind of. So people started to notice that in the Microsoft store, that a bunch of the backlog of Call of Duty games is starting to show up and show that it's a Game Pass game, but it's not showing up to actually download via Game Pass on console or PC yet. This has been long waited. Ever since the ABK acquisition was final, people have been kind of waiting for all those backlog Call of Duty and Activision Blizzard King games to come to Game Pass so people can play them. I'm super excited. I didn't play any of the Call of Duties. I didn't play any for like 10 years straight. So there's a bunch of games I missed that I at least want to go through and play a bunch of their campaigns, because I've heard a bunch of them are super good. So I'm excited for this. I hope they do it sooner than later. Marathon, Bungie's new game, Bungie under PlayStation now. Marathon is going to be revealed on April 13th. It's some kind of event that we don't know too much about yet. There is a bunch of rumors that there may be a beta or some kind of sign up that's going to be shadow dropped along with this announcement. So we'll have to wait and see on Sunday. It's been very interesting, the reaction to this. Well, the most common reaction has been about the aesthetic. Oh, this design is so unique and different. It's different than everything else we've seen lately. Look at this like semi-futuristic blah blah blah. And I'm just like, y'all, like, this is Apex Legends. Like maybe not everyone's played Apex. I think a lot of people have. The Marathon, like, its design aesthetic just looks like Apex, at least to me so far. Obviously that can change. I'm curious about this game. It's been interesting seeing a lot of people be not as excited, because I believe it's a PvPvE game. It's going to be like an extraction shooter, kind of has some PvP, some PvE involved. I'm curious to how this is going to play out. That genre is just basically impossible to break into. Even the leading game in that genre is Escape from Tarkov, and that game is a complete crap show. Has probably peaked already, even though it's not even in final 1.0 version yet. It hasn't been fully released even, and it's likely peaked, at least in popularity wise. And every other game that's tried to do it, even Call of Duty did their DMZ mode, which I actually thought was kind of cool. There's just no staying power. And Bungie on one hand has a ton of experience with keeping games alive and doing live service and doing all that, but on the other hand has not really been super great with Destiny 1 and 2, and has done a lot of weird things, and very much depends on a very dedicated fan base, and that isn't going to be there for Marathon installed. They have to build that up, and that's the trouble. So especially with the other issues that PlayStation has had with this live service push that they've tried, and that has, I think, objectively failed from what we've seen so far. You would think if someone can pull it off, it's Bungie, but can Bungie of 2025 pull it off? We'll have to wait and see. Ubisoft continues to claim that gamers don't own their games. This story keeps popping up from that The Crew lawsuit, where I believe people were suing them to try and make it because the crew and any other game that depends on servers to be played, when they shut those servers down, you can't play the game anymore. And people feel like that was their game that they owned, and they should be able to play it whenever they want. And that Ubisoft should have to do something to allow people to play offline and stuff. What a lot of people don't know about games like this is they're designed from the outset to not work natively on a device. And a good example is the Division 1, a game I love. That game, literally all of the AI and a bunch of the assets in the game and stuff get streamed to your system through their servers. So like a bunch of the game isn't on your disc or isn't even on your platform you play on. It's streamed in. Specifically behavior of AI and NPCs and things like that. You can't just offload that onto a platform. Like that engine and that game was designed from the ground up to use a server. And when they shut those servers down, that game disappears. And that's, probably not going to change. And with this situation, Ubisoft's just saying what no one else is willing to. Like, even if a game doesn't depend on servers, Steam, you buy your games on Steam, Steam can ban you from your account and you lose all your games. Like, you don't own those games, you're licensing them. That's the whole, every time you start up a game and you agree to their end user license agreement, and I assume in every one, basically acknowledging, like, I know I'm just licensing this game. I don't own this IP. I don't own this copy of the video game. I'm being allowed to play it. And I just don't think a lot of people realize that. And I'm not defending it. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I definitely think that these game makers should do everything they can to allow people to continue to access their products anytime after they purchase them. That's what they should do. But I think people are kind of naive or kind of ignorant about how these things really work when they think that they own the games they buy. You don't. At least not most of them. I'm sure there's some exceptions. So we'll see how that plays out. I suspect it's just going to be clickbait fodder for the worst gaming websites for a long time, and bad hot takes. But we'll have to wait and see. Toys for Bob, which recently left Activision Blizzard King after the acquisition with Xbox, confirms that they are working on a ambitious exclusive game for Xbox, oddly enough, along with Activision. This came along with a new ad from Xbox, which is really cool. It's assumed that Toys for Bob game is either maybe a Crash game or a Spyro game, since they're still working with Activision, and it's going to be an Xbox exclusive. We'll see. Honestly, the part about this story I liked the most was this ad that Xbox put out with Samsung. And it's this ad where there's a bunch of rats and they're living like human lives and they're going to work. And this rat that the commercial is focused on is noticing these random humans who are playing Xbox games on their phone or on a tablet or on an Xbox, and the rat comes home and jumps on their Xbox and they turn back into a human. And it has this whole punchline of what brings us joy brings us back. And this commercial gave me such like Xbox 360 vibes of this like old school, really like deep, really cool ad. And I saw a bunch of people who are typically pretty down on Xbox being like, this is one of the best gaming ads we've seen in years. And it was really, really, really good. They need to do more of that. They need, and this was a really good ad, especially to show off their whole like play anywhere thing. Like, yeah, everything's an Xbox. We have Xboxes and we would love for you to buy one of them. But if you don't want to, or you can't, whatever, fine. Play on your phone, play on your tablet, play on your Samsung TV, whatever you can access, get Game Pass and play our games. That's what we want you to do. I still think, and I don't think it gets talked about enough, I still believe this strategy is a way to get people to buy Xboxes. They're not going to outsell PlayStation. They're definitely not going to outsell Nintendo. But I think that there's all this doom and gloom about like, oh, Xbox is, giving up, whatever. And I don't think they are. I just think that they're trying to do things a different way because the way they've tried to do them for the last 20 years hasn't worked. We'll see. Either way, check out the What Brings Us Joy Brings Us Back ad. It's extremely good. I loved it. And then finally for this episode, Larian Studios announced that Baldur's Gate 3's final big patch, patch 8, will come on April 15th. That will introduce a bunch of new subclasses and as well as, I assume, some things they haven't talked about yet, which is exciting. and they're going to do a show on their YouTube, a live stream with one of the designers of this patch. And it's also supposed to kick off them doing more of these live streams to announce things. Well, there's two things that are cool about this. I've been holding off on another Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough to try out these new subclasses, so that's exciting. It is also kind of sad to know that that game is probably finally 2 years later, whatever, ending its support. But it's also exciting because the way that they're hyping up this channel and this show is that this is probably going to be the way they start talking about their next game, which we're under the impression, we know it's not Baldur's Gate, we know it's not D&D, and it's likely either going to be their existing IP that they have, or maybe a brand new one. I would murder for them to do a space sci-fi, like a sci-fi game, like a modern sci-fi game with their kind of style in that turn-based kind of isometric view. I hope that's what they're doing, but we'll have to wait and see. And moving on to some content updates. So going on this month, we have Clair Obscure. Expedition 33 is coming out at the end of the month. I should be doing some coverage of that. I will hopefully, as I get some more free time here, get back to my Mass Effect Twitch playthrough, the modded PC playthrough. I'm getting towards the end of Mass Effect 2, and then I'll be excited to jump into 3. And I will also be recording a Mass Effect Hypecast episode soon. I did a big blast across all socials and Reddit and everything of the features that people want in the next Mass Effect game from the previous games, all 4 of them. And I got a ton of great responses. I'll be doing a whole episode talking about that, as well as some few other things. So if you're a Mass Effect fan, look for the Mass Effect Hypecast. It's on YouTube. It's on all of the podcast platforms. And I will be releasing an episode of that within the next week or so. Like I said before, summer showcases are coming up. They'll be here before we know it. I do plan on co-streaming the ones we know about so far. Summer Game Fest and Xbox, I should be available to stream those, and we'll see everything they reveal. We'll see if EA, Ubisoft, all the other big platforms and publishers, what they end up doing. I'll cover as much as I can, but I will have a vacation coming up in that window, so we'll see that may drop off a bit. Okay, so let's wrap this thing up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bond Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members or Twitch subscribers. If you are interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment on Spotify or YouTube. Let me know in my Discord or hit me up on social media at Baunfire or at the Baunfire. The links for all of that are in the description of the show. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.